Hello everyone. Today I am going to read the lesson Cartooning by Rasipuram Krishnaswamy Lakshman. Let us start reading. Our teacher's appearance conformed to the classic stereotype. He was lean and dark, with untrimmed mossy clumps of hair cascading from his upper lip. One could never see his mouth fully. Only his front two teeth, which jutted out like a rabbit's when he smiled or grimaced. He wore a turban, a tight coat, and what was called a cycle dhoti. It was wound round in a manner that made the legs resemble narrow drain pipes. A stale smell of beedi hung about him permanently. When the urge to have a smoke came over him, he left the class in charge of his appointee, who told us stories to keep us engaged. While the monitor maintained order, the boy narrated the same story, always about the crow and the prince, or the crocodile and the monkey, or the donkey and the court jester. We did not pay attention as we already knew the stories. We carried on our private gossip in whispers. When the monitor saw a paper dart suddenly hurtle towards him from nowhere, or a piece of chalk flying past like a bullet, he took down the names of the suspects. Later, he submitted the list to the teacher, who, meanwhile, relaxed quietly and satisfied his need behind the toilet block. Out of the sight of the headmaster, peons, and boys, he returned to class trailing the pungent odor of beedi. One day, instead of leaving the class in charge of the monitor before stepping out to have a couple of puffs, he set us a task. We were ordered to draw a leaf, any leaf. This was something new and exciting, and all the boys at once set about it enthusiastically. We were soon absorbed in the creative task. Some boys sat wondering, trying to imagine a leaf. One fellow drew a banana leaf that was so big it went out of the wooden frame of the slate. Another boy, after pondering for a while and failing to visualize a leaf, announced loudly, I am going to draw an elephant instead. Thus, we were so busily engaged that we had not even noticed the teacher either leaving or returning. A couple of loud thumps on the table with the cane brought us back to reality. He asked us to queue up and began to critically examine our efforts one by one, murmuring comments and giving marks. Sometimes he twisted a boy's ear or brought the cane down on the leg of another. When it was my turn, he stared at the drawing for an alarmingly long time and asked me, Did you draw it yourself, Lakshman? I was frightened and stepped back, expecting a shower of blows. I replied, You asked us to draw, sir. I sat there and drew, fumbling for a safe excuse. But to my great surprise and joy, he held my slate up before the class and announced, Attention! Look how nicely Lakshman has drawn the leaf. He turned to me and said, You will be an artist one day. Keep it up. He gave me 10 marks out of 10. He was very impressed by the perfect shape of my people leaf and the details of the veins branching out along the midrib. I had seen these leaves countless times strewn on the road under the peepal tree, and I could draw them effortlessly. I was inspired by this unexpected encouragement. I began to think of myself as an artist in the making, never doubting that this was my destiny. My drawings on the floors, walls, and doors of my house began to proliferate. Once I saw father sitting in a chair and reading a newspaper. His profile, like that of a Roman senator, stood out clearly, and the fringe of gray hair circling his bald head like a wreath added to his imposing appearance. I sketched him on the floor with chalk. My mother, who was passing by, recognized the caricature. She began to laugh and invited my father to have a look at it. He furiously ordered me to wipe it off at once. Mother insisted it should remain till others come home and saw it too. Finally, she prevailed, and the caricature remained on the floor for a long time till it faded and disappeared in the course of time. School began to be less and less place of fun, gossip, and playing games. As I moved year after year from class to class, the lessons became tough and complicated, and the teachers were increasingly demanding. I was especially weak in arithmetic. It was a nightmare to have to distribute 15 mangoes equally among three people. But I was good in history, and I could name villains and heroes and warriors and identify civilizations and centuries. Similarly, I could remember the names of mountains and oceans and rivers in geography. We read prose which taught us moral values such as truthfulness, honesty, showing respect to elders, and so on, expressed through characters in folklore and mythology. The themes of the poems were taught also uh, urged us to internalize the principles of noble conduct. One of the most powerful poems was about a cow called Punyakoti grazing along with others in its herd. But Punyakoti somehow strayed on the way back home in the evening. A huge hungry tiger accosted the cow and demanded she become his meal. Not losing her calm, Punyakoti promised to come back and offer herself as his dinner after suckling her hungry calf. The tiger let her go, but to his utter surprise, she was true to her promise and returned after some time. The tiger was so moved by Punyakoti's honesty that he cried bitterly and threw himself from the edge of the cliff. The other equally unforgettable poem known to all educated Kannadigas of that era was about a woodcutter. One day he accidentally dropped his iron axe into a pond. God wanted to test his honesty. Disguised as a fisherman, God retrieved the axe from the bottom of the pool and gave it back to the woodcutter. But upon finding that the axe was made of gold, the man returned it, saying it was not his. God again plunged into the pool and came up with another axe, this time made of silver, which also was refused by the woodcutter. Finally, when the iron axe was retrieved and offered, he accepted it with delight. God was pleased with his honesty. Revealing his divine identity, he blessed the woodcutter and rewarded him suitably. I listened to the teachers I listened to the teachers and paid unflagging attention to the text, meaning, and moral of the lessons. But I dislike arithmetic class. I used to choose a seat at the back during this period. Arithmetic teacher matched his dreaded subject in appearance. The vertical white red white cast mark on his forehead gave him a permanent frown. I could not help thinking that he resembled a tiger cub I had seen in the zoo. One day I was listening to the drone of his voice without paying attention to what he was saying. He had covered the blackboard with numbers, along with several plus, minus, and equal signs and multiplication and division symbols. He had asked us to copy down the whole problem and solve it. The class was busy tackling it, and so was I, supposedly. I could not make head or tail of it, but I pretended to be engaged in the task too. Actually, I was doodling and sketching figures in the margin of my exercise book. Silence reigned, except for the rustle of paper clearing of throats, and an occasional thump of the cane on the table as the teacher asserted his presence. He was sprawling quietly between the desks, inspecting our work. Suddenly, I felt a piercing pain in my left ear. The teacher was twisting it and at the same time pulling me up by it. "You rascal!" he shouted. "Making fun of me! You will answer for this mischief." "Where have I made fun of you, sir?" I moaned. "Here," he shouted, showing the exercise book in my face and pointing to the creature like a tiger cub I had drawn. He slapped my cheek and asked me in a dangerous low tone, who is it you are making fun of, if it is not me?" Somehow the crisis subsided after arguments on both sides, with the teacher insisting it was his distorted image, while I pleaded in tears that it was only a harmless doodle of a tiger cub. It was no doubt a very unpleasant incident, but many years later I realized as I matured in my profession that the confrontation with the teacher was indeed beneficial. It was a moment of discovery, vital to my understanding of the art of caricature. Behind the mask of the teacher's public face, a person like a tiger cub could be discerned. There were other teachers whose looks could be associated with those of animals and birds. An active imagination, fueled by a keen sense of absurdity, could even see the human resemblance to inanimate objects, such as old buildings and shapes of bottles in a drug house, or to certain models of automobiles. This observation would certainly seem crazy to those with normal vision and thinking habits. A cartoonist born with a cockeyed vision manipulates a face or a human situation and distorts it without losing the sense of humor. So with this, I come to to the end of this lesson. In my next video, I'll be explaining and summarizing this lesson. Thank you, all of you.